for inviting me. Second of all, I want to thank Anna for recommending, and she's been a great friend for many, many years and in aviation, and we have that to share besides the fact that we're friends. So that's a great thing. Well, for me, my flying career started when I joined the Air Force. It was an opportunity of a lifetime. I had tried 10 years prior to join when I was in college, but women weren't allowed in ROTC. So I guess timing is everything, as they say. And by the time the Air Force was ready to accept women into aviation, I guess that's when I came in. I was able to take all the tests, and by that time I already had a foot in the door, if you will, because being a Department of Defense employee, I have access to all the regulations, which allowed me to know exactly what to expect and what was required. And I wasn't going to let anybody tell me otherwise, because I had had 2 prior rejections just by hearsay. And that's how I got started, which I am very grateful because of that. And so when I went into the Air Force, I did well in my pilot training class, and I was given my fighter qualification and was selected to be a T-38 instructor. And that was the best and foremost my favorite flying that I've ever done in the Air Force. I was selected to instruct at undergraduate pilot training. And then from there, I went to pilot instructor training, taught other pilots to become instructors in the T-38. And then from there, I went back to the basic, and I flew a souped up 172 and taught new trainees on the ways of the Air Force, how we did pilot training, the syllabus, the discipline, just the way we were. So the way we looked at it in the Air Force was, it was a two-way street. They looked at us to see if this is something that was suited for them. And then we looked at them to see if they were suited to belong in the Air Force and be flying. So I did that. And then from there, I went on to fly for the airlines. I went on to American Airlines and flew the 727 as the flight engineer when we still had those 72s. So I did the flight engineer seat, I did the right seat, and then I upgraded to captain, went to the Fokker, went to the 757, and I retired on the 767. So it's been a great 30-year career for me, from the Air Force to commercial airlines, and that was my career kind of in 2 minutes. But it was how would I say, it wasn't easy. It was hard because I was already married. I had a 3.5-year-old when I started in the Air Force, so I had all that going for me. But I think the work-life balance, the support of the family structure is what kind of helped me, and then friends that kind of pitched in and helped us out. So yeah, I love flying, and that's how I got into it. I never dreamed that I would actually be piloting an aircraft. Never, ever.
That's a great. So you retired on the 767. What was your favorite airplane to fly at American Airlines? At
American Airlines, the 727. Believe it or not. Believe it or not, only because I guess it was round dials, you know, not a lot of technology. You really flew the airplane. It responded like an airplane. I felt like I was back in the T-38. So if I wanted to slow down, I pulled the throttles and hit the speed brakes, and it slowed down immediately. You know, if I wanted to descend, climb, whatever I needed to do to the airplane, it was exactly what it responded to my input. And that was what I liked about it. Obviously, you know, the 7.6 is a big airplane. There's a lot of glass and technology and all that, but I call that finger flying. You know, when you fly an airplane, you want to fly the airplane. You want to know exactly what it's doing. Your inputs kind of equate to what the airplane's doing, and that's situational awareness that I think is so important, because when the technology came around, I saw a lot of pilots struggling with the technology, because at the schoolhouse at American Airlines, the Super 80 was coming in, and they were hampering on the technology, you know, on pushing the buttons, on, you know, just what I call finger flying. And that's not the same as flying the aircraft. So when we would go to school as 7-2 pilots, they would ask us to do a fix to fix. They would ask us to enter holding. We knew all that. Those poor Super 80 pilots didn't know what that was, because they relied on all that technology. So the basics to me are so important, that I felt that aircraft really cemented all the fundamentals of flying for me, you know, as far as commercial.
Speaking of fundamentals, the T-38, is that the first airplane that introduced angle of attack flying in the Air Force? Or
it was. It had an AOA vane on the outside, and that's one of the things when we did our walk around, that we would have to take the block off to make sure, besides the gear pins that we would take off as we did the walk around. But it was great, you know, you were in the green, you were in the red, you know, you had to let go of that pull, or you'd over G the airplane, install it out. And when you were in the yellow, you knew you had more performance out of the aircraft, and you could do that. So yeah, the AOA vane was a good heads up display. That was the most we got of heads up. Right now you've got everything on the heads up that you just look right through and everything's there. But for us, that was significant.
So when I train students, I train them exclusively using angle of attack. I have an AOA in our Cirrus, but a lot of students here they're going to be learning at flight schools that instructors don't even know what an AOA is, let alone be able to teach it. What maybe 2 minutes of advice can you give to, since you used to be an instructor, and to them as they go into flight training, about the importance of AOA?
To me, AOA is just an extra tool in the aircraft. You cannot rely on it significantly. You've got to have that situational awareness exactly of where you are, your speed, obviously, because the AOA vane can give you wrong data if you don't back it up with the rest of the instruments. So to me, it's just an extra tool. It's in the cross check that you do through the glance, you know, depending on, you come to your attitude indicator, you go to your airspeed, and back and forth and back and forth. So it's in that scan. It's just an extra tool, but it can't be relied on as a standalone instrument.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So I'd like to open it up to questions to the group, and you can either unmute yourself or go on the chat. We do have some female students here, and we'll try and get them. Here's one from Raris. What are some of the Air Force procedures that we can borrow in general aviation? Oh,
there's a lot, but my basic, and I use this all the time, and you can use this not only in flying, but in life. So when you have an emergency, I mean, this boils down to everything, you know, if everything's running right, then life is great. When things hit the fan is when you really need to know what to do. So the red box, I think, is so important. Your emergency procedures have to be embedded in your brain. There's no time to really think about, or the complacency about it. You have to actually, first of all, fly the airplane. So it's maintain aircraft control. You analyze the situation and you take the appropriate action, as in any abnormal situation, you know. So you aviate, you navigate, and you communicate. So those are basic principles for flying. But you have to have, again, and I go back to it, the situational awareness of where you are, what's going on, and what you need to do. So I think that just spans the board in aviation, period. It doesn't matter about military aviation or commercial or a private aviation, general aviation. If you stick to those basic rules to maintain aircraft control, to aviate, then you can take the time to see exactly what needs to be done with the aircraft and know your procedures, especially the emergency procedures. Really important.
We have 3 young ladies in the group, 17, 15, and 13, all doing the ground school, and they're asking,
Nice.
what made you choose commercial airlines after the Air Force? Sounds like something that they're trying to figure out which direction they want to go.
Right. Well, for me, my whole purpose was to serve in the military. The fact that I got the opportunity to be a pilot for the Air Force was the icing on the cake. So serving my country was first and foremost for me. The fact that it took so long to get there, I made sure that when I made that decision, it wasn't mine alone, it was a family decision. It was because we would have to move, my husband would have to leave his job, we'd uproot the family. And having grown up in a military family as an Army brat, I knew that moving around was not easy. It wasn't something that a lot of kids could do, but it made me stronger. So that wasn't the problem. But having my husband find a great job, and I didn't want that to end, so it was a family decision. But I made sure that I stayed in the reserves, and I made my military career as I was doing a commercial airline career. So that's what happened. And a lot of my peers were leaving for the airlines at the same time. I don't know if some of them would take another flying job in the reserves, and to me that would negate the fact that with a commercial airline job, I would have the time to come home and be with the family. So I didn't have to bring my work home, if you understand. I could go do my job, come back home, and take care of the family. So to me, it wasn't the quantity of time I spent with them, it was the quality of time. So I had them to concentrate on, but I still had my reserve job, and I retired from both, which I'm glad I did. I mean, it's a sacrifice, but you have to measure that time and the priorities that you have at the time. But they're both great. I mean, commercial and military are great. You know, the fact that I didn't have to pay for my flight training was immense. You know, I know it's not cheap, and just to get those hours and everything. So yeah.
Frank is asking a question. Have you ever had any aircraft emergencies while in the Air Force? And if so, how did you handle them?
Yes, I did. Actually, my very first emergency, I was a student pilot. I was solo, and I was in a T-37. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They call it the Tweety Bird. But anyway, I was on takeoff. As soon as I got the aircraft cleared with the gear and flaps, I had a turkey buzzard hit the windscreen. My first thought was, oh my God, it didn't come through, thank God. The next thought is, did it go into my engines? So that's the next thing I looked at. And luckily, no. But the windscreen was covered with blood and feathers and everything. And it just goes back to discipline. I put into practice everything I had learned at that point. I declared my emergency. They cleared all the aircraft out of the traffic pattern. One thing, I did make the turn, and they said, well, make sure you pull your power back. And I wanted to make sure that happened without losing an engine, you know, because sure, the engines look good, but when you pull the power back, you don't know if that's going to affect them or not. So I was very slow to pull the power back, check that, and then came around the pattern. Everything looked great. They assigned a chase aircraft with an instructor, another student on my wing to check out the airplane, make sure structurally that it looked fine. And then they flew off my wing while I configured the aircraft for the heavyweight landing. And by that time, all the emergency trucks had assembled at the end of the runway. I landed, pulled off at the end, turned the engines off, jumped out, and they're like, oh, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm fine. 30 minutes later is when actually my knees started shaking, and I was like, what did just happen? My God, you know. But it kind of cemented the fact that I knew that I was going to be okay, and I was going to be a good pilot, that I had what it took to get through training. And it was early on one of my first solos that this happened. So but later on, as an instructor pilot and pilot instructor training, there were weather minimums, and we took off. I took off with a student. So he was actually, I'm trying to think of he was one of my foreign students that I was instructing at the time to become an instructor pilot. And we took off, and again, another bird, but this time it actually went into the engine. So we came around in the weather. This time I slowly pulled that engine back, left it running at minimum % there. And we came in for a heavyweight landing at minimums. You know, I mean, the weather was right at minimums. Had we gone out and the weather gone down, we would have had to divert on a single engine, which could have been across town or who knows where, but we were lucky to have that. And at American, just a few emergencies, but nothing that the crew couldn't handle. I want to say this though, in commercial airline flying, the hardest thing in an emergency is making that PA to the public, to keep them calm, to let them know that everything is going to be all right. That calmness really assures the passengers that you know exactly what you're doing. And to me, I think that was harder than actually flying the airplane and taking care of any emergency. But anyway.
Wonderful. No, that's great. And I wonder, you know, there was a T-37 Canadian Snowbird that just went down. I wonder what happened there. It looked like,
oh, really?
He may have hit a bird or something as well. So, yeah.
Was he in formation?
No, I think she was out of formation.
Oh, okay.
But the thing is, my student who trained with me, he was there watching live recording on his phone. He sent it to me.
Oh, wow.
So it's very sad. Let's see, question here. Do you now do any flying?
I have friends like Anna who have planes and invite me to go flying. So I do that. The last jet that I actually flew was the Vision Jet, the Cirrus Vision Jet, which was amazing. The owner actually, I flew up to Dallas with his chief pilot. And after we landed, he said, okay, you're going to fly the jet home. I'm like, absolutely. Thank you very much. So it was a great experience. And the time of day was perfect because my favorite time of day of flying is right at dusk. As the sun's coming down, the lights start coming up, and it's just a beautiful world out there.
All right. And they're asking, where can we find you on, are you on social media, and can anybody find you there and follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Yes, they can find me on LinkedIn for sure. So.
Very good. And by the way, do you know Captain Michelle Sobel?
Sobel, she sounds familiar.
She flies a few captains at American. She's a very close friend. She's based in LA, but yeah,
okay.
She started off as a flight attendant, so.
Oh, nice. Very good. Very good. Yes.
If you would cross paths with her.
No. American's a big airline. Huge. Everybody's like, oh, do you know? Sorry.
Yeah. All right. Terrific. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it for the questions. Yeah, JT's asking, well, JT has a bunch of different questions, but
okay.
He's asking, there has been accidents on formation landings. Now the Air Force is not teaching formation landings. What's your opinion?
I think I'm very biased. You know, I mean, if the student is not ready, you absolutely cannot clear them for certain types of flying. And formation landings were done all the time. I don't see a problem with that. The tricky part in the formation landing is your cross-check, other than inside to your lead, if you're on the wing, and I believe that's probably the most tricky part is flying on the wing for a formation landing, because lead has the runway in sight. They make sure they line up on their side of the runway. But the wingman has to throw in that runway as in the cross-check. And I think if taught right and the student is receptive to that cross-check, when you look at the wing, look inside and look out exactly to where you're landing. And when you actually have to drop lead as the primary focus, once you're in the flare and touching down on the runway, I think it's something that a student should be comfortable with and familiar with, and if not cleared. Now, I don't know what the parameters of why. I know there was an accident in the formation landing, and because of the investigation, maybe is why they have stopped that procedure, but I don't see anything out of the usual for that.
Analysis, and they said he bounced or something on the round out, and that's
Okay.
thing went bad from there. So
Right, but you have your procedures for that. So if you know you go lost wingman, or if you bounce, you can't make the land. And the third thing is that, right, the navigate, aviate, navigate, and communicate is communication. You've got to let everybody know what you're doing, because if they don't know what you're doing, they can't take care of what needs to be taken care of. So as soon as you know something's out or wrong, you have to call it out immediately and know what the procedure is. So we had an incident while I was an instructor in T-38s at Laughlin Air Force Base. And we did night formation, not just night flying. We did night formation. And there was a deck of clouds. And unfortunately, one of the students with the instructor went lost wingman and pulled down into the clouds, got disoriented, thinking he was pulling up. He was pulling down and went straight into the ground. Oh. I think the largest piece they found was maybe 1 foot, you know. So yeah, I mean, it happens, but night flying, instrument flying is very delicate, very dangerous. You have to be aware that inner ear is, I was taking off from Dallas on the 727 to the south. It was a clear night, clear in a million. I made that right turn out of traffic and my head just kept turning and I could feel it, but I had to trust the instruments. And immediately I figured out, okay, this is not going well. I immediately told the captain, you need to take the airplane. I can't do this. Because to me, if I would have kept that, I would have been pulling the other direction. Who knows what would have happened. So I recognize it. So being able to recognize the situation that you're in and knowing the procedure of trusting your instruments, because you know, it's a clear night. I could see outside still, and still my head, my inner ear was telling me I was still turning. So it was a dangerous thing, but.
Great advice. Well, terrific. Olga, thank you so much. What a pleasure to have you with us. And I know
Well, thank you for having me. I wasn't sure how this was going to work. I even called you. I said, okay, what's going on? I was just a little confused, but that's okay. I wasn't sure what you wanted to do, but this worked out fantastic. And so I do appreciate that. Ana, cheers. Congratulations to Jose Maria on his graduation. And to all the students there, I wish you all the best. Keep trucking. And I know we're in different times right now, but you know, flying is a passion that'll live with you forever. It's like people who play tennis or play golf. You've got flying, and that's the best thing there is. So, right. Lawrence, thank you so much.
Olga. All right. Take care. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye.